Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so we are back with week 2 of the Wednesday Well Check Black edition. And y'all know that my eyes have been watering. I don't know what's going on. So we're moving through Z Clarke's book, Black People Breathe. I love this book so much. So last week we leaned into chapter 11, and we talked about that self-love journey, what that means to us, um, in ways that we can lean into self-love, ways that we can be intentional about pouring into ourselves and understanding what self-compassion is. And then we, took that quote by Toni Morrison, "You are the best thing." And so I hope that you guys had some good reflection between last Wednesday and this Wednesday. And so this week we're going to be centering around chapter 3, which is safety is a privilege. But before we kind of move into, the flow of things, did anybody want to just share really quickly, one person, if anything, came up for you from last week's Wednesday Glow Check? Anything that kind of stood out? It could be, anything that was interesting, surprising, positive, or neutral. Okay. Well, I know for me, I want to share that. I don't know. Nick and I were talking this morning, and I feel like the last couple of weeks have been, very positive, noticing a lot of shifts that are happening personally and professionally. But I found myself, constantly repeating out loud and even silently, you are the best thing. By me understanding that I am the expert in my life, that I have everything that I need. So I just felt like it was that ongoing mantra that was popping up in my mind. So I'm really grateful that I was able to take away that from last week. Okay. So I thought that it was just kind of fitting for us to move into safety and what that means for us. So safety as a privilege, we kind of talked about this last week. And we understand that for Black folks, safety is not something that, was necessarily accessible to us. It's not something that was necessarily consistent. And because safety is something that, we don't always feel like we can obtain, that vigilance or hypervigilance kind of becomes our baseline. And so you are kind of walking around in a disassociated hyper-aware state all of the time. And so you are not necessarily recognizing stress in your body, how it feels for you, how it's coming up for you. And sometimes you don't even understand and feel all the places that you're storing in the stress and the dis-ease into our bodies, okay? And so before we get into just the mini discussion and the somatic and the breath exercises, I want you guys to just take a moment, take notice of how you are arriving in the space, okay? You can either say it aloud or in the chat. How are you arriving in the space when you hear the word safety? What is happening in your body? And how is that allowing for you to show up with us today? One word.
When I think of safety, I think of slowing down.
Okay. What does that say? Comforted? Comforted. That's what came up for me. When I thought about safety, I just felt like a sense of comfort, almost like I wanted to snuggle up in a cozy blanket, which would require slowing down. Anyone else? How are you guys arriving in this space? When you hear that word safety, how are we showing up?
Can you repeat that?
So in one word, when you hear the word safety, what is coming up for you? And how does that relate to how you are arriving in the space? Peace. Is that what it says? Peace? Okay. I like that. Peace. Okay, we got another piece. Okay, y'all. Okay. What does that say?
Calmness.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So what I want you guys to do is everything that came up for you. So Naisha said slowing down. We got comforted. Courtney said, we got two folks that said peace. I thank you for setting this up like this. I like being able to see y'all, the responses. So I want you to hold on to what came up for you when you hear the word safety. You know, as we're moving through, you know, today's Wednesday well check, whatever came up in your mind, whatever sensations you felt in your body, when you hear the word safety, we're just going to hold on to that energy. Okay. And so the prompts for today that we're going to lean into is you guys are going to think about, where did you learn safety? Where did you learn what that feels like, right? So those earlier messages, those earlier images and experiences, and where did you learn it wasn't guaranteed, all right? So I'm going to repeat that prompt again. Where did you learn what safety feels like? And where did you learn it wasn't guaranteed? Right? So in chapter 3, Clarke, she explores the reality for many Black people that safety was never something that was natural. It's something that really has been strategic. And so safety can look like code switching. It can look like people pleasing. It can look like staying quiet or being agreeable. And it can also mean overachieving, being in that energy, right? And so these strategies that we come up with for navigating safety and what that means to us is not, you know, a flaw. It's not anything that we're doing wrong. It's just an adaptation. It's essentially it's a maladaptive response to our environment. Okay. And so in this chapter, Clarke also references Timothy Clark's work, and he talks about the 4 stages of psychological safety. And I really appreciate this text, especially as a psychotherapist, because it is, you know, as a psychotherapist, it's my responsibility to take care of the psychological safety of my clients. And this is something that we actually talked about in our team meeting yesterday. When we think about different hazards, and, you know, every job has a safety hazard or a safety concern that is at the forefront of their mind, and this is something that they prepare for. And so when you are in the therapeutic space, when you are in like that psychotherapist space, psychological safety is something that we are always thinking about, okay? And so when you think about the 4 stages of psychological safety, one is inclusion. So inclusion safety, and that means that you have feelings of acceptance and belonging. The second stage is learner safety, and that's that you feel safe to ask questions and to make mistakes. Okay. The third stage is contributor safety, and that is that you feel safe enough to be able to share your ideas, to share your opinions, and even to share resources or contribute. Okay. And then that 4th stage of psychological safety is challenger safety, and that you feel safe enough to speak up and to challenge the things that you're hearing, challenging those messages, right? Or even challenging things within your home, like within your parents. If you have a different belief or thought system, you feel that this is a safe space for me to push against the grain, to challenge that narrative and say, hey, is something else possible? Or I actually think about this in a different way. Okay. So these are the 4 stages of psychological safety by Timothy Clarke. And this is something that Dee talks about in her book, chapter 3. Okay. And I always think it's interesting when we talk about, even emotional and psychological abuse, and how we don't understand how much that can really seep into our psyches and affect our self-esteem and how we go after things. And so if you think about the history of slavery and institutional racism, having control of someone's mind and being able to influence the conditions of your thoughts is another way that you can ensure that someone is constantly staying in a state of fear, which means that you are not present in your body because you don't feel a sense of safety and presence in your body. Okay. And so kind of like what we touched on last week, we talked about when you're under stress, when you're triggered, when you are experiencing trauma, you are having that response. You're activating that stress response cycle. And so when we think about the stress response cycle, we're looking at fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. And so I think many of you may be familiar with all of those stages. And if you are, I just want to take a moment. If you think about the stress response cycle and how you usually respond to things, does any one of those resonate with you, right? Are you the type of person when that stress response cycle is activated, who goes into fight mode? That means that your body mobilizes and you're ready to attack the threat. And that could look like irritability, it could look like anger, it could look like lashing out or being argumentative. Wanting to control things. Who's a fighter? I would say I am.
I know why.
I'm always like, wait a minute, right? Just being argumentative. And I think a part of that just comes from being the advocate. I'm always like, no, it has to be a better way.
I think I am to a certain extent. I think it depends on the situation and what's going on in that moment. And if it's worth me, even like I get upset about it and I be upset on my own, like, and maybe go off, but when it's to that person, again, it may not be as aggressive as I want it to be, but I want to be because that's what it is. That's how I feel in my head, like in my mind. Like I want to cuss you out, but I don't know. I just think it all depends.
And so the next one will be flight. And that's when your body, wants to escape, you want to run, you want to flee. And so that can look like anxiety. So that can be that anxiety response where you're overworking, you're restless, that perfectionism. You have issues with stillness, you want to avoid stillness, right? So a lot of times, when we're doing the trauma stabilization or resourcing or building your toolkit, trying to figure out what safety looks like in your body, trying to figure out what presence looks like in your body. And sometimes folks struggle because there is a belief that slowing down mindfulness and meditation only looks one way. And a lot of times we talk about stillness looks different for everyone, especially if you are an anxious person, right? So if you're an anxious person, you're always churning just a little bit. So what stillness looks like for you, may mean that you may have to do a moving meditation, right? But if that stress response cycle is activated, right, especially if you're at work or even at home, constantly cleaning and scrubbing the floors and all of those different things, that's what it can look like. If you are the type of person where you want to fight, you want to avoid, right? You want to pour that energy into something else. If the stress response cycle for you is the freeze, and that means that your body is shutting down to survive. So that's looking like that disassociation, the numbness, procrastination, right? You may feel stuck or just have difficulties making decisions. So if you're feeling overwhelmed and that stress response cycle is being activated, and you're having, you know, an exchange with someone and they're asking you questions, you know, you may feel, it may take you a moment, like, okay, I need a minute to process, right? It could be minutes or it could be days that you are just really struggling to access your thoughts and move those thoughts out into work. So that can look like the freeze. And the fawn is a body of, it wants to stay safe. And so basically that can be like people pleasing, like, oh, no, everything is okay, everything is fine, right? Oh, being over accommodating, minimizing your own needs, like, no, right? I think we kind of talked about that last week. We talked about, you know, putting your needs aside so that others are okay, right? Or difficulty setting boundaries. So you have those porous boundaries, right? We always talk about the boundaries to set boundaries, find peace by natural to wild. And rigid boundaries, healthy boundaries, and porous boundaries. So if you're a person that you kind of lean into fawn, then this is where you would see the difficulty with having boundaries and saying no, right? So who leans into fawn? Who would say they're a fawner? Appeasing other people to stay safe.
I feel like I practice all of these for real. I feel like I've definitely gotten better with my people pleasing, but yeah, I feel like I still practice all of these for real. But I know I definitely gotten better at like just people pleasing, saying no, putting my own desires and choices and preferences over what making other people comfortable. It was hard. It still is hard, you know, especially the feeling, you know, not feeling bad after you standing on it. But yeah, so like I will practice all of these, you know, like to a different degree, like you were saying the first one. Even if I ain't fighting that person or going at that person, I'm fighting with myself about it. Like so attached to it to where I'm like fighting with myself about it instead of focusing on something else, you know. So,
Yeah. So I want you guys to think about where you are on the stress response cycle. Okay, so Rachel, you were able to say you definitely recognize that you know that you're a fighter. Alexis, you feel like you lean more into fawn. So it's that fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. So I want you guys to kind of think about where you are with that cycle. And just for purposes of time, I'm going to skip over the next session. But when you think about how you respond to stress, there are different interventions that you can do. There are different, you know, Zen practices, meditation practices, somatic practices that you can use to help your body to calm down and to find presence and grounding. So if any of you guys recognize how you present within the stress response cycle and you want some tools and some interventions of how you can take care of yourself, just shoot me an email. If you have my number, shoot me a text message and I'll make sure to get that over to you. We have a grid that we normally put together and I don't have that link ready, but let me know and I can send that guys to you later. Okay. Okay. So remember, safety doesn't have to mean that everything is perfect. It means that in this moment, you feel that you can calm yourself and feel safe and feel steady enough to breathe, that you can give yourself permission to allow for your shoulders to soften and understand that you can exist and you can be present in your life without feeling like you have to brace and always be, you know, on edge and just be in that vigilant or that hyper vigilant space. Okay. So I want us to practice that. Like I said, if you need the support, I'm seeing some of the comments pop up, let me know and I will send that to you, right? So before we go into the practice, what I really want you guys to, wait, what time is it?
There you go.
I'm gonna let you get the timekeeper, just don't distract me. So I want you guys to verbally say it louder in the chat. What signals safety in your body? When you notice yourself bracing or scanning, what comes up for you in your body? What are you noticing for yourself? And are there any ways that your family or your community taught you how to be safe?
Can you ask the first part again?
So the first one is, the first one is what signals safety in your body? So when you feel safe, what is that signal that you feel physically that you're safe?
Oh, I feel calm.
And do me a favor, what does calmness mean to you?
Like
What experience like for you, Courtney?
like not heavy. Like I can breathe good. I don't feel any worry. It's just like I feel free
Okay.
when I feel safe. Like it feels like I can be me. I can be open and I can breathe good.
Okay. And so I'm glad that you said that because, you know, we're always talking about the breath. We're always relying on the breath. And so I think that it is important for us to pay attention to what is happening with your breathing when you feel safe. Okay. And so the second question was, or the reflection, when do you notice yourself bracing or scanning? I think this is an interesting prompt. I think it was a couple of months ago that I shared something about a post and it had to do with triggers or red flags. And, you know, I kind of touched on a lot of times when people are triggered or there is a red flag that's present, you think that it's this big glaring light or, you know, all of these flags and fans that are just ever so present in your environment. And it doesn't always look like that. And so when I think about that question, when do you notice yourself bracing or scanning? Naturally, I'm a very observant person. I'm just kind of taking in my environment before I allow myself to get comfortable, especially if it's a new environment. But the one thing that I notice is that when I find myself bracing, when I find myself scanning, then that signifies to me that the stress response cycle has been activated. So if I'm having a conversation with a person and I'm just noticing any and everything that they got going on in their face, in the back of their throat, on their shoes, or whatever it is, that is my signal that there is something that feels unsafe. There's something about this that feels suspicious to me. And in that moment, I am usually holding my breath. And I find myself sighing, not intentionally sighing, but I'm sighing because my body is saying breathe. So I'm bracing myself like, okay, what's about to happen? And initially, I didn't realize that that was a process that was happening for me to assess whether or not this person or this situation or this environment is safe. Okay. So Courtney was able to recognize what signals safety in her body. And then I shared, okay, when do you notice yourself bracing or scanning and what is happening with your breath? And so the third prompt that we brought up, how did your family or your community teach you to stay safe? So I want someone to think about that prompt and give me an example and just kind of think about what is happening with your body or with your breath when you think about the teachings that you have within the community or within your family about staying safe. What does that look like?
I would say within my family, that wasn't like something taught to me. Like safety wasn't something taught. It's always just been like kind of like people please and take care of people and you get in where you fit in when you can get time to yourself. But safety was not never a part of like growing up. There was no take care of yourself. There was no self-care. There was none of that for me.
Yeah, I think for me too, like that wasn't something that was taught to us to in that area of safety. Our safety was more so like just be safe outside and be uh make sure you pay attention to your surroundings. But as far as that, no, I kind of agree with Courtney pretty much on that for me.
What about the community? So you guys are saying like, okay, in my family, there were no examples. There was no sit down teaching like this is how you keep yourself safe. This is what safety looks like in your body. What did you learn from the community about how to stay safe?
I guess I could say the community wise, I would say my godmom, 'cause she was more of a into doing a lot for the community, and so she would do a lot, and I would be around her. She would take us on different things, but just show up. Um, it was just more so show up for yourself and come and do something. Like even though my mom probably wasn't taking me out of town or doing whatever, she was giving me that exposure of going out of town and just showing up. So I guess I would say that that was part of it, like her showing me that in that sense.
I would say my friends were like my homegirls and stuff. We taught each other what community, I mean, like safety was. Like, all right, having a girls' day or taking time for yourself or doing check-ins. And it took for like us to go to therapy and all of us are in the stage where we're like parenting our parents for us to know like this is what we need for ourselves. So it's more so my friends and my peers who taught me like what taking care of yourself is, what safety is versus my family.
Yeah. And you know what is really interesting, and I'm loving to hear the separation. So when you think about this question, what did your family or your community teach you about, how to stay safe? And what I'm loving, what I'm hearing is how you guys have been moving along the healing continuum. Because when what was popping up in my mind was when we go out in the community, and it's like you hear those messages, keep your head on a swivel. Always be aware of your surroundings, right? Those are the messages that you get very young. And y'all ride together, everybody be together. One person swing, you swing, right? So these are the messages that we usually are getting in the community, but you guys didn't identify those things as, ooh, that got me chills, as a way to stay safe. So for me, I am recognizing that as you understanding that those were actually perpetuating messages of fear and that we are not safe in the community. So I'm just loving that. I'm loving that. I'm loving that.
And so we should say that she learned to keep herself safe from her family.
From her family. Okay, that's good. Mm-hmm. And so I want to just go back to that question that we talked about. So you guys are recognizing ways that you have learned messages of being safe, either in your family, from your friends, right? In the community, ways to take care of yourself. When you feel safe, when you recognize safety within yourself and within your body, Courtney kind of touched on this a little bit earlier. What's happening with your breathing? Naisha, what's going on with your breathing when you are operating in a space of safety?
Definitely, I noticed that my breathing slows down. I tend to be very hyper vigilant, even like if I'm by myself. I'm listening out for other things, I'm listening for myself. So it can be uncomfortable sometimes, but I know when I feel safe, I can really just focus on one thing in the moment. And that's very rare for me. So when it happens, I kind of like embrace it.
And so you're able to feel your breath. You have that relationship with your breath that you understand the safe presence of your breath.
Absolutely.
I love that. I love it. So before we move into the breath work and somatic practices, is there anything else coming up for you guys? Any other reflections or anything popping out for you? Okay. And I want to make sure that I want to leave a couple of minutes after when we do our closing, because I want to kind of go over some things in the book, because we have 2 more weeks left leaning into this book. And I want to make sure that we're intentional about really practicing the breath work and the somatic stuff for the last 2 weeks, okay? All right, so as always, I want you guys to get comfortable where you are. Allow for yourself to get comfortable and just fall into the normal pattern of your breath. The breath practice that we are going to lean into today is called softening vigilance. Okay. So at this time, I just want you to simply notice your breath. Feeling that healing energy flowing in and out. We're not trying to force calm or safety. We're just simply noticing and practicing. I want you guys to go ahead and take one big inhale, breathing into your belly and allowing for it to fill up like a balloon. And then forcefully push it out. And just continue to breathe. So go ahead and inhale, breathe into your belly for 4, 3, 2, 1, and hold. Now exhale slowly through your mouth for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So we're gonna go here for 3 more rounds. So go ahead and inhale into your belly. 4, 3, 2, 1. Hold. Now slowly exhale. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Inhale into your belly. 4, 3, 2, 1. And hold. Exhale slow. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. One more time. Inhale. 4, 3, 2, 1, and hold. And exhale slow. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And just continue to breathe. Reminding yourself that you are allowed to soften. Remembering in this moment that you are safe. Each inhale, I want you to breathe in that cleansing and healing breath. Feeling in calm and safety in this moment. Releasing fear and tension. I want you to place your hand at heart center. And the other hand, have you place it on your belly for that compassionate hold. And as you breathe, just allow yourself to gently sway from side to side. Imagining your energy softening. Imagining safety, peace, and calm all around you. I want you to stay here for a few more breaths. Taking in those last minutes of safety and peace and presence. And whenever you're ready, allow yourself to come back to the space. When you're ready, just simply put ready in the chat. So I know we ran a little bit over it, and thank you guys for being patient. But what I want to do is I'm going to just skim through the chapters, and I want you guys to see if there is anything specifically you feel like you want us to focus on for the next 2 weeks, because I want us to spend more time just really leaning into and demonstrating some of the somatic practices. And in Z Clarke's book, she talks about a lot of different things. She talks about driving while Black, being the only Black person in the space, feeling overwhelmed, witnessing suffering, that collective trauma, and all of the ways that that shows up in your body. So I want you guys to think about, what would you like to see for the next 2 weeks? We can definitely lean more into the stress response cycle and what that looks like. And I can adjust the grid for sure to be more specific around her text. And we can run through some mindfulness and somatic exercises, or if it's anything that you guys feel like you need from your own specific experiences as a Black person, and I can support you with that. Imposter syndrome. You're not really Black, or you're not Black enough, how that affects people. Many of us are told that we talk like, white girls or white guys or, whatever. All of those things have an impact on us. And feel free to say aloud or in the chat what you need from me as we are moving through this Black edition of the wellness check in terms of safety and presence. I think one of the things that's really coming up for me is just thinking about, as we're working to break the stigma of therapy, the stigma of therapy, mental health versus mental illness. And, when you're that person in your family that's moving along the healing continuum, when you're, doing your work, if you don't have folks in your community that believe in the healing work that you're doing, if you struggle with those boundaries and how that can impact you in terms of anxiety when you have to show up in certain spaces. I feel like that's something that I would like to move through in terms of energy with the stress response cycle, but then also to, feeling like you can just go into spaces and feel connected to your breath. So I know that's something that I would like to focus on, but I'm definitely open. What do you think? Okay. All right. Well, as we're moving through, I see something that came up. I do want you guys to think about one small way that you can practice. Okay, stress response. That's a good one. Okay. The stress response cycle. Okay. All right. Okay, I got you. So we'll dive more into that and we'll work through it. But I want you guys to really think about, what is one small way that you can practice safety this week? Okay. And our closing affirmation for today is that safety can be practiced. My body deserves a moment of ease, and I am allowed to soften. So safety can be practiced. My body deserves moments of ease, and I am allowed to soften. All right. So I want you to take that affirmation with you. think about one small way that you can practice safety this week. And then when we come back next week, we'll dive more into, the stress response cycle and making sure that we can calm and ground ourselves when we're activated. Okay?
Can you name the third affirmation again?
I am allowed to soften. All right. So thank you all for joining. This was a good well check. I'm excited to dive into the stress response cycle and kind of go over that grid. So get ready. Make sure y'all have your journals. Make sure you're wearing something comfortable. If you need a mat, pillow, chair, whatever, because we're gonna, move our bodies a little bit. I'm tired of sitting in this chair. Okay.
Thank you guys.
Yes. I'll see y'all next week. Okay.
See you next week. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Yes, of course.
Bye. See you guys next week.
Bye.